Hello there, if you just clicked the story, I just wanted to subscribe the channel because I do lots and lots of hard work to get you the best stories and the forgotten American folklores. So I deserve a subscribe. Now get to the story. The scream continued even after I stopped moving. It came from every direction at once. The walls vibrated, the television shook on its stand, dust fell from the ceiling, yet my own mouth remained closed. I could feel my throat, I could feel myself breathing, but the house was using my voice. Then the scream stopped instantly. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the blood moving in my ears. The television went black. The lamp beside the sofa went out. I stood in the darkness. Then the front door slammed somewhere far above me. I looked toward the hallway. The final door was still open. A faint yellow light spilled across the floor. I stepped toward it. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the door behind me closed. I turned around. There was no handle, no hinges, just a blank wall. The sitting room was gone. I was standing inside the long corridor. The corridor looked nothing like the basement. The walls were covered with faded wallpaper. Family portraits hung at regular intervals. At the far end was a staircase, and every few seconds I heard a scream from somewhere above it. My scream. I climbed the stairs. There were more steps than there should have been. I counted them without meaning to. 10, 20, 30. By 40, my legs were beginning to ache. The house was getting colder. At 50, I stopped counting. The staircase seemed to continue forever. Then I noticed something carved into the wall beside me. A sentence. The first scream was not a warning. I moved my flashlight lower. Another sentence. It was an announcement. Below that, the house had heard her. I stood there staring at the words, the woman, the screaming woman. Maybe she had never been trying to frighten anyone. Maybe she had been trapped. Maybe every scream people heard from the house was simply someone trying to communicate. I climbed higher. Another scream came from above. This time it sounded different. It was weaker, almost exhausted. Then I heard another voice underneath it, a man's voice. He was repeating my name. I stopped. The voice repeated it again, then again. It wasn't calling me. It sounded like someone was reading my name from a list. I reached the top. A narrow hallway stretched ahead. There were 4 doors. The first was open, the second was closed, the third was open, the fourth had been nailed shut. I walked toward the first. Inside was a bedroom, an old bed, a dresser, a mirror. I stepped inside. The mirror immediately caught my attention. My reflection was standing there, but I wasn't. I stood several feet away. The reflection remained directly in front of the glass. It looked exhausted. Its face was pale, its clothes were dirty, and there was blood beneath one eye. I raised my flashlight. The reflection didn't copy me. Instead, it slowly lifted its hand. It pointed behind me. I didn't turn. The reflection pointed again, then it touched its own thought. I understood. It was warning me about the voice. I looked at its mouth. It moved. No sound came through the room, but I could read the words. Don't speak. I froze. The reflection stepped closer to the glass. It pressed its hand against it. Then it began writing with one finger. 4 letters. Run. I turned. The bedroom door was closed. I hadn't heard it shut. I walked toward it. The handle wouldn't move. I tried again. Nothing. Behind me, the reflection started pointing against the mirror. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the scream came, not from the house, from inside the mirror. The glass cracked. A thin line appeared across my reflection's face, then another, then dozens. The reflection began screaming, still without sound, its mouth opened wider, far wider than a human mouth should. The cracks spread across the entire mirror. I backed away. The bedroom door suddenly opened. I ran. I didn't care where I was going. I entered the hallway. The nailed-shut door at the end had opened. Beyond it was another room. I rushed inside. It was almost completely empty. Only a wooden chair stood in the middle, and someone was sitting in it. A woman. Her back was toward me. Long gray hair, white dress, bare feet. I stopped. She didn't move. I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was the woman from the photographs. The woman who had appeared in the chair outside. The woman connected to every screen. She slowly raised one hand, then pointed toward the wall. I followed her finger. There was a small black switch. I approached it. The woman remained still. I pressed the switch. A light came on. The entire wall illuminated, and I realized it wasn't a wall. It was a collection of photographs, hundreds of them. Every photograph showed someone standing inside the house. Some were old, some were recent, some were so recent that the dates were the same week. I moved closer. Then I saw the photograph at the center. It showed me standing in this exact room. The woman sitting in the chair was visible too, but the photograph had been taken from behind us, and someone was standing in the doorway. I zoomed in. The person had my face. I looked toward the doorway. Empty. I looked back at the photograph. The figure was closer. I looked toward the doorway again. Nothing. Then I looked at the photograph. The figure had moved. Now it was standing directly behind me. I slowly turned. Nothing. The woman in the chair suddenly stood. I spun back toward her. She was facing me. Her face was old, pale, tired, and covered with tiny cracks like dried earth. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. She pointed toward the ceiling, then toward me, then toward the door. I understood the warning. Something was coming. And whatever it was, the woman was afraid of it. The floor above us began shaking. Heavy footsteps crossed the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. Then the sound stopped directly overhead. The woman looked up. Her expression changed. For the first time, she looked terrified. The ceiling above us began to crack, and from inside the darkness above the ceiling, my own voice whispered my name. The whisper came again. My name. Quiet, almost gentle. It came from directly above the ceiling. I looked up. A thin crack had appeared across the plaster. Dust drifted downward. The old woman stood beneath it, staring upward. She didn't run. She didn't even move. She simply watched. Then another crack appeared. This one stretched across the entire ceiling. I stepped backward. The woman finally moved. She grabbed my wrist. Her hand was freezing. She pulled me toward the doorway. I stumbled after her. The ceiling groaned. Something heavy shifted above us. Then a single drop of water fell from the crack. It landed on the floor between us. I looked down. It wasn't water. This was black, thick, almost like oil. Another drop fell, then another. The woman pulled me harder. We reached the doorway. Something struck the ceiling. The entire room shook. The light went out. For a second, there was absolute darkness. Then I heard breathing, not above us, inside the room. Something was breathing in the darkness. The old woman pushed me into the hallway. I turned back. She was still standing inside. I tried to reach for her. She shook her head. Then she pointed toward the staircase. She wanted me to run. I did. I ran down the hallway. Behind me came a tremendous crash. The ceiling collapsed. I didn't turn around. I heard wood breaking, glass shattering, furniture being thrown across the room. Then came the scream, the old woman's scream. It was so loud that I nearly fell. I kept running. The hallway seemed to stretch in front of me. Doors appeared where there had been walls. Walls disappeared where doors had been. The house was changing around me. I reached the staircase. The stairs were gone. There was only a vertical shaft descending into darkness. I stopped at the edge. Behind me, footsteps, bare feet, slowly approaching. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. But the footsteps continued, closer, closer. I had nowhere to go. Then I remembered the trapdoor, the basement, the white door, the strange hallway. I turned toward the wall beside me. There was a door there now. I hadn't seen it before. I opened it. A staircase descended. I went down. The basement looked different. Every photograph had been removed from the walls. The shelves were empty. The white door was gone. Only the concrete floor remained, and in the center, the wooden chair. The same chair from the room upstairs. It was facing me. I stopped. Something was sitting in it. At first I thought it was the old woman. Then I realized it was me. Another version of me sat in the chair. Same clothes, same face, same camera. But this version looked exhausted. His eyes were sunken, his skin was pale. He had clearly been there for a long time. He looked at me, then slowly pointed toward the floor. I followed his finger. There was writing carved into the concrete, a date, 3/17. Beneath it, another date, then another, hundreds of them, all different years, but every single one had the same time, 3/17. I crouched. My other self shook his head. He pointed toward the ceiling. I looked up. Nothing. Then he pointed toward his own mouth. He opened it. No sound came out. I understood. He couldn't speak, or perhaps he had spoken too much. He reached into his pocket. Slowly, he pulled out a small piece of paper. He held it toward me. I took it. There were only 3 words written on it. It copies you. I looked at him, then toward the staircase. The footsteps had stopped. The basement was silent. I looked back at the paper. The ink began spreading across it. New words appeared. It is learning. Then another line. Don't let it finish. I looked at the other version of myself. He was no longer looking at me. He was staring toward the corner of the basement. I followed his gaze. Nothing was there. Then I noticed the shadow. It didn't belong to anything. It was simply standing on the wall, a human-shaped shadow, tall, thin, its head tilted slightly to one side. I raised my flashlight. The shadow didn't disappear. Instead, it moved. It stepped out from the wall. There was no body, only the shadow. It stood upright on the concrete floor. Then it turned toward me. I felt my stomach tighten because the shadow had my shape, my height, my posture. Even the slight bend in my left shoulder. It raised its hand. I raised mine without thinking. It stopped. I stopped. It lowered its hand. I lowered mine. Then it smiled. I hadn't. The shadow slowly opened his mouth, and my own voice came from it. It began speaking, not to me. It was repeating everything I had said since entering the house. Every word, every breath, every nervous sound. Perfectly. Then it repeated something I had never said. A sentence I had never spoken. A sentence that hadn't happened yet. It said that I would scream. I stepped backward. The shadow stepped forward. It said I would run. I ran. It followed. It said I would turn around. I refused. Then the house screamed, and this time, the scream came from my own throat. The scream came from my throat, but I never opened my mouth. I felt the sound tear through my chest. It was my voice. Exactly my voice. The same pitch, the same panic, the same breathlessness, but I wasn't making it. The shadow was. It stood several feet away, shaped exactly like me, its mouth open in a perfect imitation of the scream coming from my body. The other version of me in the chair covered his ears. The basement walls began vibrating. Dust fell from the ceiling. The shadow screamed louder. I couldn't hear anything else. Then, suddenly, silence. The shadow closed its mouth. I remained standing. My throat burned. I touched it. Nothing. No injury, no blood. But I could still feel the echo of the scream inside me. The other me slowly stood from the chair. He pointed toward the staircase, then toward the shadow, then toward me. I understood. It wanted me to leave, but it couldn't follow me outside. Not yet. It needed something first. My voice. I started toward the stairs. The shadow followed. I moved faster. It matched me. I stopped. It stopped. I raised my flashlight. It raised its hand. I lowered it. It lowered its hand. And I did something I hadn't tried before. I turned my back on it. The shadow remained behind me. I could feel it watching. I walked toward the staircase. 1 step, 2, 3. Nothing happened. Then I heard my own voice behind me. It sounded calm. It told me to turn around. I kept walking. Then it changed. It became the voice of the old woman. Then the voice of the man whose name I'd seen on the wall. Then the voice of a child. Then dozens of voices together, all using the same words, all asking me to turn around. I didn't. I reached the stairs. The other version of me followed, but when I looked back, he wasn't there. Only the shadow remained. It stood beneath the chair, then it pointed toward the floor. Something had appeared there, a small wooden box. I approached it. The box was old. Its lid was covered in scratches. There was no lock. I opened it. Inside was a cassette recorder. I recognized it immediately. It was the same kind I had used when I first began recording the house, except this one looks decades old. A label had been stuck across the front. The date it was written on it, 1978. I pressed play. Static filled the basement. Then a man's voice began speaking. He sounded frightened. He described entering the house. He described hearing the screaming. He described finding the basement. And he said something that made me stop breathing. He had seen the same shadow. He had tried to escape, but the shadow had copied his voice, then his footsteps, then his breathing, then his memories. The recording continued. The man said that once the house learned everything about a person, it no longer needed them. I looked toward the shadow. It was standing perfectly still. The recording ended with a single sentence. The man's voice said that the house didn't kill people. It replaced them. The cassette stopped. The shadow moved. It stepped toward me. I stepped backward. It stepped again. I moved toward the stairs. It followed. Then something changed. Its shape became less precise. The edges of its body began flickering. The face blurred. The hands stretched. It was trying to become something else. I realized what was happening. It hadn't finished copying me. It still needed something. My voice. I suddenly knew what I had to do. I had to stay silent. No words, no sound, nothing. I climbed the stairs. The shadow followed. I reached the top. The basement door slammed behind me. I found myself back in the hallway. The house was completely dark. Then the clock downstairs began ticking. 3:17. The shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. It raised its head, and this time it looked exactly like me. Not almost. Exactly. Same face, same clothes, same camera, even the same small scar near my eyebrow. It smiled. Then it spoke in my voice. It told me that I had already lost. I said nothing. The shadow walked closer. It stopped 3 feet away. Then it whispered something I had never told anyone, a private memory from my childhood, something that had nothing to do with this house. My stomach dropped. The house hadn't just learned my voice, it had learned me. The shadow smiled again, then it reached toward my face, and the moment its fingers touched my cheek, the entire house went silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind, no ticking, no breathing, no movement. Then somewhere upstairs a door slowly opened, and from inside that room I heard the old woman scream my name. The old woman's scream came from upstairs. I looked toward the staircase. The shadow was still touching my face. Its fingers felt cold, not like skin, not like wet stone. Then the lights in the hallway came on, every bulb at once. The shadow disappeared. I was standing alone. My hand went immediately to my cheek. There was nothing there, no mark, no coldness, just my own skin. For several seconds I didn't move. Then I heard the old woman again, not screaming this time, crying. A weak, exhausted sound coming from somewhere above me. I climbed the stairs, one step at a time. The house felt different now. The walls were no longer shifting, the doors weren't moving, the floorboards weren't creaking. Everything had become strangely normal. That scared me more than the screaming. At the top of the stairs I found a hallway I had never seen before. It was short, maybe 20 feet. At the end was a single door. The door was painted pale blue. I had never seen it in any photograph. There was a small brass number attached to it, 17. I approached. The crying stopped. I placed my hand on the knob. It turned immediately. The room beyond was a child's bedroom, a small wooden bed, a dresser, a rocking horse, a faded rug. Moonlight came through a window covered by thin curtains. Everything was perfectly clean. On the wall hung dozens of drawings, houses, trees, people. The same house appeared in almost every picture, but there was something strange about the people. Every drawing showed them standing outside the house. Nobody was ever inside, except in one picture. I moved closer. A child had drawn a person standing behind a window. The figure was completely black. Underneath it, written in uneven handwriting, were 3 words. He lives here. I looked at the window. It was closed. The curtains moved slightly. There was no wind. I walked toward it. The glass reflected the room behind me, the bed, the dresser, the rocking horse. Then I saw someone standing beside the bed. I turned. Nobody. I looked at the glass again. The person was still there, a young boy, maybe 8 years old. He was wearing old-fashioned clothes. His face was pale. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking underneath the bed. I slowly lowered my flashlight. The reflection showed the boy pointing beneath it. I looked under the bed. Nothing. I looked back at the window. The boy was gone. Then the rocking horse moved once, forward, backward, forward. It stopped. Something underneath the bed scratched the floor. I stepped away. The sound came again, slowly, deliberately. Then a small hand appeared from beneath the bed. I froze. The fingers curled around the edge. A child's hand, pale, dirty. I backed toward the door. The hand disappeared. Then a boy crawled out. He was real, or he looked real. He stood beside the bed and stared at me. His mouth never moved, but I heard his voice inside my head. He wasn't speaking. He was remembering. Images suddenly flooded my mind. The house, the same bedroom, a woman crying a child, a man standing outside the door, a fire somewhere downstairs, people running, a woman screaming, the boy hiding beneath the bed, and something standing in the hallway. A tall black shape. The same shape I had seen in the basement. The memory changed. Years passed. The boy grew older. The house changed. People came and went. The shadow remained. It wasn't haunting the house. It has always been there. Watching. Waiting. Learning. The boy looked at me again. I understood what he was showing me. The house didn't create the thing. The house contained it. Every scream I had heard was someone discovering that truth. Every person who had vanished had eventually become part of the thing. Not their bodies, their memories, their voices, their habits, their fears. Everything that made them recognizable. The house kept those pieces, and the shadow used them. The boy pointed toward the hallway, then toward me. He was warning me. It had already taken enough. I looked at the child. He raised his hand. A small white mark appeared across his palm, the same mark that had appeared on my wrist earlier. Then the mark moved. It traveled across his fingers, up his arm, and disappeared beneath his sleeve. I understood. He wasn't alive. Not anymore. He was another memory the house had kept. The boy walked toward the door. I followed. He stopped outside, then pointed toward the staircase. At first I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed a figure standing at the bottom, the old woman. She was looking up at us. Her face was terrified. She raised one finger to her lips, then pointed toward the ceiling. I looked up. The sound came from above. A slow, dragging noise. Something was moving across the attic floor. The boy grabbed my hand. His fingers were freezing. Then he pulled me toward the opposite wall. There was no door there. He pressed his palm against the wallpaper. The wall opened, not like a door. The entire section of wallpaper folded inward. Behind it was a narrow passage. The boy pushed me inside. I turned back. He was already disappearing. His body became transparent. His face faded. Within seconds, only an empty bedroom remained. I stepped into the passage. The wall closed behind me. I was surrounded by darkness. Then a sound came from somewhere ahead. A voice. My voice. But this time it wasn't speaking. It was whispering numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I kept walking. The numbers continued. When the voice reached 17, something slammed into the wall behind me. I turned. The passage was empty. Then the voice whispered 18. I looked ahead. The darkness stretched farther than the house could possibly contain, and somewhere deep inside it, another set of footsteps began following mine. This was part 2 of the story, and tomorrow I'll be uploading the part 3 of the story. I hope you liked it, and if you did like the story, please hit the like button, and if I deserve the subscription, please do subscribe the channel for more such long lost American folklores. Thank you so much.